I was, by every account that mattered in England, a man who did not repeat himself. I gave an instruction once. Once was sufficient. In 9 years as the Duke of Dravenmoor, I had employed 47 secretaries, 6 estate managers, 3 stewards, and 1 very unfortunate solicitor who had mistaken my silence at a dinner table for an invitation to keep speaking. They all, to a man, understood the governing principle of Thornvale. Within a week, the Duke spoke, the household listened, and the matter was finished. Mrs. Cecily Vane lasted 11 days before she disagreed with me for the first time, and I want to tell you honestly that I did not handle it well. She arrived in November, referred by my solicitor as a woman of particular organizational capability who had found herself, after 2 years of widowhood, in need of meaningful employment. I had found myself in need of someone who could catalogue the East Wing Library, 4,000 volumes in no discernible order, cross-reference my estate ledgers against a decade of tenant correspondence, and do it without requiring my presence or my conversation. A practical arrangement. I agreed without an interview. I had learned over 9 years that interviews told you nothing useful about a person, and Mrs. Vane came with written testimonials from 2 households I respected. It was enough. I met her on the 3rd morning, by accident, in the corridor outside the library. She was standing on a chair. Not a library ladder, a dining chair she had apparently carried from some other room entirely, and she was reaching for the top shelf with the particular determined calm of someone who had decided a thing was happening and was not in the business of asking permission. She had dark eyes and a composed, unremarkable face, and she was wearing mourning gray that had been altered so many times the original cut was only a ghost of itself. The flag was on her desk. I noticed it because I notice everything, and because a widow's military flag, folded in that precise triangle, does not often appear in a ducal library. It sat at the corner of her working table, squared and deliberate, like a paperweight or a compass point. She did not hear me approach. I cleared my throat. She looked down from the chair, met my eyes, and said, without a flicker of alarm, "Your Grace, these top shelves haven't been touched in 20 years. I'll need a proper ladder and someone to hold it. I'll submit the request this afternoon if you'd prefer the formal channel, or you can simply tell me yes now and save us both the paperwork." I stared at her. In 9 years, no one had offered me a choice that included the phrase "save us both." "A ladder," I said. "Yes." She nodded as if this was entirely satisfactory, climbed down from the chair, picked it up. She picked up the dining chair with both hands and carried it back toward the hall with the same expression a person wears when returning a borrowed pen, and went back to her work. I stood in the doorway of my own library for a moment longer than I have ever stood anywhere doing nothing, and then I went about my day. The first argument was about the Haltham tenants. I had written a directive, written because I preferred written directives. They were precise and they could not be misheard, ordering the Eastfield rents raised by 12% commencing the new year. It was a sound financial decision. The Eastfields had been underproducing for 3 years and the rents had not adjusted accordingly. The mathematics were straightforward. Mrs. Vane appeared at the door of my study on a Tuesday afternoon. She knocked. I said, "Come in." She came in and set the directive on my desk, open to the relevant passage, with 2 pages of tenant correspondence spread beside it. I had not asked for the correspondence. "These are the Haltham letters," she said. "The Pruitt family, the Dodd widow, and the 3 Marsh brothers. The underproduction you're observing in the Eastfields is documented in their correspondence from 21, a drainage failure that was requested to be repaired and was not. If the rent rises without the drainage repair preceding it, 2 of these families will not be able to pay. I thought you'd want to know before the directive went out." I looked at the letters. I had not read them. That was what I employed people for, to surface what required my attention. But I had not asked her to surface this. I had asked her to catalogue the library. "The drainage repair," I said, "is not your concern." "No," she agreed pleasantly. "The library catalogue is my concern. But the ledger's cross-reference against the correspondence, as you requested, and this is what the cross-reference produced. I can ignore it if you prefer. I find I'm not very good at ignoring things, but I'm willing to try if that's the preference." She was not smiling. She was not defiant. She was perfectly, infuriatingly reasonable, and she was standing in front of my desk with 2 pages of evidence that my directive was badly timed, and she had the look of a woman who had stopped worrying about consequences somewhere around the time she received a flag in a folded triangle and realized that the worst had already come. Leave the correspondence, I said. She left it. I read the letters that evening. I amended the directive. The drainage repair was commissioned in February. I did not tell her. She did not ask. But I noticed, when I passed through the library 3 days later, that she had squared the flag more precisely on her table, the way a person does, I think, when something has gone right and they have no one to tell. The second argument was about me. It was late in December, and I had come into the library after dark because I could not sleep, and the library was the only room in Thornvale that did not feel, on certain nights, like a place I was performing a duke inside. I did not expect her to be there. The fire had burned low. She was at the long table with a candle and a ledger and a cup of something that had gone cold, and she looked up when I came in without surprise, because, I was beginning to understand, she had ceased to be surprised by things. "Your Grace," she said, and went back to the ledger. I sat in the chair by the fire. I did not particularly mean to. I simply did, and she did not make anything of it, and for 20 minutes the only sounds in the room were the fire and the turning of pages, and I found, for the first time in a very long time, that the silence in a room with another person in it was not an imposition. Then I said, without entirely planning to, "Your husband was a soldier." "He was," she said. "How long?" 7 years. 4 campaigns. She did not look up. "He was very good at it." "He was not so good at the parts in between." A pause. "I was very good at the parts in between. We managed, between us, to cover most of the requirements of a life." I looked at the fire. "I am sorry for your loss." "Thank you." She said it the way a person says it when they have said it several hundred times and it has become a word that means something different than condolence now, something more like acknowledgement. "He would have found you extremely funny." I turned my head. "I beg your pardon." "He had a strong appreciation for men who were very serious about very large things," she said, still looking at the ledger. "He would have liked the way you run the estate. He would also have liked to see someone argue with you, because he felt that men who were never argued with were, on balance, slightly dangerous. He argued with his commanding officer regularly and considered it a form of loyalty." She looked up, finally, and there was something in her face that was not quite amusement and not quite sorrow and was, I thought, the expression of a person who had learned to carry both at once. "I have been carrying on his habit, in a small way. I hope you haven't found it too objectionable." I was looking at her. I was looking at her in the way a man looks at something he has been walking past for weeks without understanding what it was. "No," I said. "I have not found it objectionable." She nodded once, like a settled account, and went back to the ledger. I sat by the fire until the candle burned low. I did not sleep any better that night. But it was a different kind of wakefulness, the kind that has something to think about, which is, I have found, considerably more bearable than the kind that does not. The third argument was in January, and it was the one that finished me. She had found, in the cross-reference of the library's estate papers against the oldest correspondence files, that the Dravenmoor bequest to the Thornvale almshouse had lapsed, had simply been overlooked, across 2 successive stewards, for 14 years. She had documented it. She brought it to my study not with triumph but with the straightforward manner of a woman delivering a fact, and the fact was that 40 families had been receiving less than they were owed for 14 years, and the simplest remedy was a lump reinstatement with the current year's distribution. I read the documentation. It was airtight. The figures were exact, the legal basis was clear, and the presentation was the work of a mind that did not leave loose ends. "This is thorough," I said. "The cross-referencing was what you asked for," she said. "This is what it produced." "You've been here 8 weeks, I said. 9, she said, mildly. 9 weeks, and you have corrected my rent directive, documented a 14-year oversight, and, I am fairly certain, reorganized my East Wing library according to a system of your own invention." The original system, she said, with great composure, was not a system. "I developed a new one, yes. I left the key on your desk last Thursday. I saw the key. It's a very clear system. Mrs. Vane." I set the documentation down. I was looking at her again. She was standing across the desk from me in altered morning gray with that composed, unremarkable face, and she was entirely steady, because she had been steady, I realized, since the moment she arrived, steady in a way that had nothing to do with placidity and everything to do with having already survived the thing that was supposed to undo a person. "What would you require," I said, "to remain at Thornvale indefinitely?" She looked at me with those dark, direct eyes. "I would require," she said carefully, "clarification on the nature of the role." "The nature of the role," I said, "is that I find I am not able to conduct the affairs of this estate efficiently without someone who will argue with me when I am wrong, and I will acknowledge this plainly, because I think you deserve plainness. I am not often wrong, but I am occasionally wrong, and the occasions on which I am wrong appear to require you specifically." She was still looking at me. She had gone quite still, the way she went still when she was thinking precisely. "That is not a standard employment arrangement," she said. "No," I said. "It is not. You are proposing," she said slowly, working through it in the careful way she worked through a ledger, "something else." "I am proposing," I said, "that you stop arguing with me across a desk and argue with me across a dining table instead, on a permanent basis, as my wife, if that is something you can consider." "I understand entirely if it is not. You have managed very capably without my dining table for 2 years, and I would not presume." "Yes," she said. I stopped. I had more to say. "I expect you did," she agreed. "The answer is still yes. I find I am also not very good at saying no to clearly sound proposals, and this one has been, from where I'm standing, fairly evident for about 6 weeks." She tilted her head. "You are slower than I expected, for a man who runs things." I looked at her for a long moment. I felt, for the first time in 9 years, something in my chest that I can only describe as an argument I had no interest in winning. "The flag," I said. "On your table." She glanced toward the library, as if she could see it through the wall. "It comes with me," she said quietly. "He was very good at what he did, and I loved him, and he is owed the reminder. I won't put it away." "I wouldn't ask you to," I said. She looked back at me, and something shifted in her face, something that had been held very carefully for 2 years, and did not need to be held in quite the same way any longer. We were married in March, at the Thornvale Village Church, with 4 guests and no announcement, and the flag folded on the front pew in the precise triangle it had always kept. The rector was brief. The morning was clear and cold. She argued with me twice on the carriage ride home. I disagreed with her on one point and conceded the other, which is, I have decided, a perfectly satisfactory ratio for a life. She was right about the drainage, and the system in the library, and the almshouse, and very nearly everything else. I was right about one thing, the most important thing, the only one that finally mattered, and that was her.